The wind off the bay cut through Mara Quinn like thin glass. Winter had not brought snow, only a wet cold that sank into the bones and stayed there. The hotel where she washed dishes on the late shift had trimmed hours for the slow season. The rooming house had asked her to leave that morning, and now she sat at the end of a broken pier with her daughter in her lap and the town at her back. Jo was 5. Her cheeks were too bright. Her breath sounded short and tight. When Mara pressed her lips to the girl's forehead, heat burned against her mouth. "Breathe, Jo," she whispered. "In and out. Listen to me. Breathe." Jo gave a small cough and closed her eyes again. On the far side of Thorn Bay, the old lighthouse stood like a white rib in the gray air. Its lamp had gone dark years ago. The town said they did not need it now. GPS was good enough. Charts were good enough. Still, at certain hours it felt strange to look out and see only a tower shaped like a memory. A letter stuck from the mesh pocket of Mara's pack. The paper had gone soft at the corners. Knox County Court. Petition for guardianship. Petitioner Veronica Hale. Respondent Mara Quinn. Requested relief, sole custody of minor child Joanna Quinn. Mara shoved the letter back into the pocket. Her hands shook. She drew Jo closer and wrapped her scarf around them both. A car passed on the road above the wharf. Another. No one stopped. A small tugboat slid from a slip and chugged out along the pilings. Its cabin light glowed dull gold in the mist. The boat moved past, slowed, and came back. The engine dropped to a low hum. The boat tapped the pier with a soft thud. A man stepped out from the cabin. He wore a black knit cap and a work coat thick with salt and resin. He did not come close. He set a steel thermos and a sealed pack of warming wipes on the plank between them. "I will leave these here," he said. "Warm water with honey. The wipes help when the air is wet like this." Mara did not answer. She had reached too often and found nothing to hold. "I will not touch either of you," the man added. "Take them if you want. I will sit over here." He backed to the railing and lowered himself onto it. He did not stare. He watched the water. The engine idled. Mara reached for the thermos. Steam rose in a thin ribbon when she opened the lid. She wet one wipe, squeezed it, and laid it on Jo's throat. The girl let out a thin breath as if a gate had opened. "Thank you," Mara said. "How long has she been like this?" he asked. 2 days, Mara said. "Last night was worse. Kids here get tight in the chest when it is damp," he said. "At my shop I have a warm mist machine for babies. If you want, I can take you there. No questions. 4 walls. Warm air. That is all." Mara studied him. He had the look of a man who spent long days with tools and long nights with his own thoughts. The lines at the corners of his eyes were not sharp, but deep like channels worn by tide. His voice was steady. He kept his distance. He did not ask for her story so he could feel generous. He offered what he had. "My name is Adrian," he said, as if he had forgotten manners until now. "Adrian Shaw. Boat work at the end of the quay by the gas station." Mara nodded once. She adjusted the wipe on Jo's neck and said, "We will go." The boatman did not smile. He rose tied off and lifted the thermos back to the deck. He held out a hand, then took it back and stood aside so Mara could step down on her own. She moved slow with the child in her arms. He watched her feet, not her face, and kept his hands at his sides. The shop was warmer than it looked from outside. A pellet stove ticked in the corner. The place smelled like cedar shavings, linseed oil, and orange peel drying on a cord. A fold-out sofa sat near a low table. On the table, a small humidifier shaped like a blue whale changed color as it ran. "This one is clean and still works," Adrian said. "Folks leave extra gear here after donation drives. I keep what can be used again." He filled the machine. He set a small kettle to heat. He opened a jar of a simple herb mix. He did not pretend to be a doctor. He said so. But he had eyes that had watched enough winters to know the little things that help. Mara settled Joe on her side on the sofa and propped a pillow behind her back. The whale machine sent up a thin blue cloud that turned purple, then blue again. In the colored light, Joe's lashes lay quiet on her cheeks. Her breath was still short, but it was not a scrape anymore. "Can I rinse these?" Mara asked, lifting the used wipes and a cloth. "Sink is there," Adrian said. "Soap in the drawer. Clean towels in the cedar box." At the sink, warm water ran over Mara's hands and leached some of the tightness from her chest. As she turned, a sheet slipped from her coat sleeve and skated along the floor to Adrian's boot. He picked it up. He read the bold line at the top, "Petition for guardianship." He stopped there. He did not look at her. "Where should I put it?" he asked. "Burn it," Mara said before she knew she had spoken. "No, sorry. Do not burn it. I will need it." Adrian folded the paper with careful fingers. The fold was neat, like the keel line on a plan. He set the letter on the high shelf far from the reach of small hands. "Up here," he said. He poured hot water into a chipped mug. He passed it to Mara with a space of air between his hand and hers. "Drink," he said. "The wind here has a long arm." Mara looked toward the door. A heavy coat hung on a peg. Next to it hung a child's rain jacket, yellow and small, the hood shaped like a little beak. She turned back to the sofa. "You should sleep a little," Adrian said. "I will be at the drafting table. If she wakes, call me." "I do not sleep," Mara said. "Every time I close my eyes, I hear how people say my daughter is not safe with me." Adrian did not argue. He opened a book of plans. He set out a thin pencil and a curved rule. Curves rose on the page. The sound of the pencil on paper filled the room in a way that made it feel less empty. "It is quieter than talk," he said after a time. "But it keeps me here." "You always say odd things like that?" Mara asked, and heard warmth in her own voice that surprised her. "Only when the simple lines do less harm than the grand ones," he said. Mara kept watch as the whale breathed out blue, and then violet, and then blue again. She looked down at her hands. The nails were short. The skin across the knuckles was cracked from dishwater and cold air. A year ago, these hands had known how to set an IV. They had known how to wrap a bandage tight enough to matter, but not so tight it hurt. She had left the EMT program when her husband had said, "Stay home, be steady, be quiet." He had died on the bay last winter. People called it an accident. People also called Mara bad luck. People liked to say both things in the same breath. The door swung in with a soft push. A woman in her 60s stepped inside. Silver hair in a low knot. A coat the color of wet sand. Her eyes took the room in quickly and gently. "You still leave the door unlocked," she said to Adrian. "In this town, people are kind, but the cold is not." Adrian looked up. "Hi, Mom." Mara rose in a start and drew Joe into her arms. "We will go," she said. "I am sorry. We will leave as soon as the child can walk." "Sit," the woman said. "My name is Ruth Shaw. I am Adrian's mother." I was a family court judge for a long time. Do not worry. I am here for a tray of scones I forgot, not for your papers. From the way Ruth set the tin on the table, Mara knew the woman saw more than she chose to speak aloud. Ruth poured tea from a small thermos. She slid a cup toward Mara. Sometimes Ruth said a warm room, and two people who do not ask for a story will do as much as medicine. No one answered. The stove cracked in the corner. The scones will be here for the child when she wakes, Ruth said. Adrian, are you working here tonight? Yes, he said. Bottom layout for a yawl. I will stay at the shop. You, Ruth said to Mara in a voice that felt like a porch light, can have the spare room at my house if you want a bed. Or you can stay where the machine is. Whatever makes you feel safe. Here is good, Mara said. Her eyes had gone again to the small yellow coat. Ruth nodded, as if that single choice told her what she needed to know. She touched her son's shoulder, then stepped out. The door closed. Wind filled the seam and then fell back. Night dropped like a heavy quilt. The shop grew quiet in the way only workrooms can. Mara drifted for a few minutes against habit. When she woke, Joe was snuffling, but the scrape was gone. The child's skin felt warm, not hot. Adrian was still at the table. He had turned to a new page. He was no longer drawing hull curves. He was sketching a lantern, simple and strong. Along the bottom edge, he had written neat notes: glass cage, brass cap, test height, for Fresnel ring. You want to light the old tower, Mara said. He shrugged. Boats come in fine without it, he said. But people miss it. Do you? Mara asked. I do not miss the lamp, he said. I miss the feeling that someone is awake for you while you are out there. Mara's throat tightened. I used to ride night shift on an ambulance, she said. I know what it is to sit beside a stranger and count breaths and refuse to leave. Adrian lifted his head and looked at her the way men look at the horizon, to check if the fog is moving. So you are that kind of person, he said. What kind? She asked. The kind the light is for. Mara let out a real sound. This time a laugh that repaired something small inside her. Joe's eyes opened in a narrow slit. Mama, she whispered. I am here, Mara said. Joe stared at the whale and spoke in a hoarse, grave voice. The fish breathes smoke. Yes, Adrian said, coming only as close as seemed right. It is a magic fish. It helps small people learn to take big breaths. Who are you? Joe asked. Adrian, he said. I fix boats. Sometimes I fix lights. Do you have cookies? Joe asked. Scones, Adrian said, pointing to the tin. But only for people who can say thank you. Thank you, Joe said, quite formal. He split one small biscuit and handed half to Joe and half to Mara, with a careful space of air between his hand and theirs. In the morning, Adrian said, when Joe's eyes were heavy again, I can take you to the free clinic by the Fisherman's Co-op. The doctor works early. My mother knows the route without the wait. Mother. The word landed in the room and sent out rings. Mara wanted to say no, to say she would go alone. The word alone had kept her afloat all year, like a poor life raft. But she looked at Joe. She listened to the small sound of sleep. She looked at the letter on the high shelf. Thank you, she said. We will go. About the papers, Adrian said, glancing up at the shelf and back down at his notes, you do not have to walk that part by yourself. No. Mara said fast, the old metal rising to the surface. I am used to it. Adrian did not push. He added a thin line to the plan, as if he were writing a small line in a long diary. Wind changes. You do not have to brace for every gust. Mara wanted to say she had survived by bracing for every gust, by meeting every rumor head-on, by holding a broken door shut all night with her back. But the room smelled like cedar and oranges. The air was warm. The child slept. The urge to argue slid away. She set the cup down and looked again at the yellow coat by the door. "Whose is that?" she asked. "My daughter's," Adrian said. He spoke like the sea on a flat day. "She does not need it now." Mara turned her face and did not ask anything else. Sometimes the kindest act is to leave a sentence where it lies. Adrian stood and lifted his heavy coat from the peg. He set it over Mara's shoulders without touching her neck. "Nights here run long," he said. Mara held the edge of the coat. The smell of pine sap and salt pulled at some old rope in her mind. She did not say thank you. Thank you felt too small. She said, "We will not trouble you for long." "Lights do not ask boats to stay or go," Adrian said. "They just work when needed." Outside Thorn Bay moved in the dark. The old lighthouse stood with its black lens, but in the shop a different kind of light had come on. It did not hang on a tower or flash through a glass ring. It was a coat that smelled like pine set on the right shoulders at the right hour. Morning found them with a thin sun and a hard sky. Ruth drove them to the clinic behind the co-op, where men mended traps and painted floats. The doctor was a woman with a calm face and clever hands. She listened to Joe's chest and smiled. "Good news," she said. "The lungs sound better. I will send you home with a small inhaler and a follow-up date. No fee. Here we know that winter bills do not wait for paychecks." "Thank you," Mara said, and her voice did not crack. In the parking lot, Adrian was swapping a child seat into his old truck. "A call came in while you were inside," he said. "The volunteer sea rescue crew needs a batch of stretcher frames, the float type. They are short on funds this year. I build them when I can." "Why those?" Mara asked. He looked at the bed of the truck and set a strap in its slot. "They brought a boy up on one," he said. "The year my daughter did not come home. The boy lived." Mara closed her eyes and saw red lights on wet pavement. She saw her own hands pressed over a stranger's hand, while the siren howled over them both. "I used to hold on to people whose names I did not know," she said. "Maybe that is why we met at the pier," Adrian said. "People who keep watch tend to find each other." Mara looked past him at the bay. The old tower was still dark, but the morning felt brighter, as if a lamp she could not see had come on somewhere behind her. The clinic air had been clean and warm. Outside, the wind smelled of rope and diesel. Mara pulled Joe's hood up before she climbed into the truck. Ruth slid into the passenger seat with a folder in her lap. She did not open it. "We will stop by the county office," Ruth said. "I want to check a court schedule. No filing, no talk. Just dates." Mara almost refused, but the thought of a surprise letter in the mailbox like the last one made her chest tighten. She nodded. The county building sat on a rise above the harbor. From the parking lot you could see the masts in neat rows, and beyond them the pale arc of Thorn Bay. Ruth told them to wait in the truck. She went inside without her coat buttoned. 10 minutes later she came back with 2 thin slips of paper. "Pre-trial hearing," Ruth said. 4 weeks. No other dates yet. That is enough for now. Mara stared at the slips. 4 weeks. Not forever. Not tomorrow. Something to hold and dread at the same time. They drove back through Main Street. The shop windows were neat, with winter displays, knitted caps, lobster traps, painted red for the holidays, postcards of the lighthouse from years ago. Mara kept her head down, but she felt the weight of eyes through glass. In the grocery window, two women leaned close over a basket of apples. Their mouths moved. Their glances flicked toward the truck. One woman shook her head. The other's lips curled in a half-smile that had no warmth in it. Mara looked away. She had lived with talk since the night Evan's boat had gone under. Talk about how she had stayed home that night instead of standing on the breakwater waving him in. Talk about how his sister Veronica had warned him not to marry a girl who worked shifts in an ambulance and grew up inland. Talk about what Joe might or might not be to the Hale family. By the time Adrian pulled the truck into the lane by his shop, Mara's hands were stiff on her knees. "You all right?" he asked. "Fine," Mara said. The word tasted like chalk. Joe ran ahead into the shop, drawn to the blue whale. Adrian stayed by the open truck door. "You do not have to pretend for me," he said. "I am not pretending," Mara said. He tilted his head as if considering a change in the wind. "The tide does not care if you admit it is high," he said. "But it is easier to stand when you know it is coming in." Inside, Joe was pressing the whale's button to make the light change. Purple, then blue, then green. Her laugh was quick and small. Ruth set the slips of paper on the high shelf beside the folded court letter. The two papers sat together, quiet but solid. "You have a date now," she said. "That means you have time. Time is space. Space is room to build something that will hold." That afternoon, Adrian went back to the boatyard to finish a keel repair. Ruth stayed in the shop, reading at the drafting table while Joe napped. Mara washed the mugs, dried them, then began to sweep the floor. She did not like to sit idle. It made the air feel heavy. Halfway through, the door opened. A man in a brown cap stepped in. He looked Mara over without speaking, then said to Ruth, "I heard she is staying here." Ruth did not lift her eyes from the page. "And you know what they say." "I know what I have seen," Ruth said. The man shifted his weight. "Just saying, folks remember last winter. They remember whose boat came back empty." Ruth closed the book. She met his gaze. "Folks also remember whose hands brought you in after your stroke 2 years ago." That was her. "Maybe you keep that part in mind." The man's mouth closed. He touched the brim of his cap to no one in particular and went out. Mara stood still, broom in hand. "You did not have to do that," she said. "I did not," Ruth agreed. "But I wanted to." When Adrian came back at dusk, the light outside had gone the color of cold iron. He brought in a coil of rope and the smell of the sea. "How was the day?" he asked. Mara hesitated. "Quiet," she said. Adrian hung the rope on a hook. "Quiet is a good start," he said. That night, after Joe was asleep, Mara sat at the small work table with the slips of paper in front of her. She touched the edges as if they might burn or vanish. Adrian was at the bench planing a strip of oak. The sound was steady even. "You ever think," she said, "that people only stay if they do not know the whole story?" Adrian set the plane down and brushed the shavings into his palm. "I see all of it," he said. "That is why I am still here." Mara's throat went tight. She looked away before the heat behind her eyes could show. They worked in silence. Outside, the bay moved against the pilings with a sound like slow breathing. The first snow came 2 days later. Not a storm, just a sift of white that covered the roofs and softened the sound of the road. Joe pressed her hands to the window and breathed fog onto the glass. "It looks like powdered sugar," she said. "It will melt by noon," Mara said. But she let Joe stand there and watch. Adrian had gone early to the boatyard. Ruth was at the county library. Mara used the quiet to scrub the kitchen counter and set a pot of oatmeal to simmer. The shop had become more than shelter. She wanted to keep it clean, as if order might hold off the mess that waited in the 4 weeks ahead. The knock came at mid-morning. Not a friendly tap. 3 hard raps spaced like someone counting. Mara opened the door halfway. Veronica Hale stood there in a slate coat, hair perfect despite the wind. Her eyes swept the room before they settled on Mara. "You have been hard to find," she said. Mara did not step aside. "I did not know you were looking." Veronica smiled without warmth. "I always know where my niece is, even when her mother tries to hide her." "Joe is not," Mara began, but her voice came out too sharp. She stopped herself. Joe was sitting cross-legged on the rug, watching. Veronica's gaze dropped to the girl. "Joanna, come here." Joe looked at Mara, then back at Veronica. Her voice was small. "I am playing." Veronica's smile thinned. "You will have plenty of time to play when you are somewhere safe." "She is safe," Mara said. "Not according to the petition," Veronica said. "And not according to the people who have seen you this past year. I have statements. Witnesses. You can make this easy, Mara. You can agree to let me have her now, and we can skip the rest." Mara's fingers curled around the door edge. "No." Veronica's eyes hardened. "Then I will see you in court. Enjoy your borrowed time." She turned and walked away, her boots leaving clean cuts in the thin snow. Mara closed the door and leaned against it. Joe had gone back to the whale machine, pressing the button to make the light turn blue. Her small face was calm in a way that made Mara's chest ache. She was too used to adults with hard voices. That afternoon, Adrian came back with a crate of cedar offcuts. He set them down and studied Mara's face. "What happened?" "Veronica came," Mara said. "Did she touch you?" he asked. "No, she does not have to. She just stands there and says things like they are already true." Adrian nodded slowly. "Then she is counting on you to believe her before the judge ever hears you." Ruth came in just as he said it, her scarf loose around her neck. She set her bag on the bench. "I saw Veronica's car leave the lane," she said. "What did she want?" Mara told her. Ruth listened without interrupting, her hands still on the scarf. "We will answer her in court," Ruth said. "Not here, and we will not answer with the same kind of words she uses. That only feeds the story she is trying to sell." The rest of the week passed under a kind of shadow. In town, Mara could feel the shift when she walked into a shop. Conversations paused. Eyes tracked her. At the post office, a man she knew from the diner stepped out of line to let her go ahead, but his smile was too polite, too empty. On Friday, Adrian asked her to come down to the boatyard. "I want to show you something," he said. The yard smelled of fresh paint and cold metal. In the far shed, a line of orange rescue stretchers leaned against the wall. They had aluminum frames and yellow mesh beds. "These are the floaters," Adrian said. "The sea rescue crew takes them out when the water is rough." Mara ran a hand along the nearest frame. "You built these?" "Some," Adrian said. "Some were here before." "This one." He tapped a frame with a darker patch where a name had been sanded off. "This one pulled me out of the bay when I went looking for her." Mara understood he meant his daughter. The air between them felt thinner for a moment. "Why show me?" she asked. "Because when we go to court, they will talk about the accident last winter," Adrian said. "They will say you were not there. But they will not say the part about how the rescue team was late because the old floaters broke under weight, or how Evan went out with a bad radio, or how the boatyard had been asking for funding for months." "You think that matters?" Mara said. I think the truth matters, Adrian said. And I think there are people in that room who need to hear it from someone who has been out there in the dark water. Mara looked at the stretcher again. It was simple, strong, built to keep someone above the surface long enough to reach shore. That night, Jo fell asleep with her hand on the yellow raincoat by the door. Mara stood over her and thought of the 4 weeks ahead. The tide was coming in, but maybe she would not be standing alone when it did. The next morning, the snow was gone. The bay lay flat under a pale sky. Ruth came into the shop with 2 paper bags and a notebook. "We start now," she said to Mara. 4 weeks is both a long time and no time at all. Mara was at the counter pouring oatmeal into bowls for Jo. "Start what?" "Getting you ready," Ruth said. "Court is not about telling the whole truth all at once. It is about making sure the right truth is heard at the right moment." Mara set the bowls down. "I do not know how to do that." "That is why I do," Ruth said. They cleared the work table. Jo sat nearby with her crayons. Ruth opened the notebook and drew a line down the middle of the first page. "On this side," Ruth said, "is what they will say about you. On this side is what you will answer with. Not to match them, to redirect." She began to list the likely claims: unstable housing, unemployment, lack of family support, absence during Evan's last trip. Each one landed like a small stone in Mara's stomach. "And here," Ruth said, "is where we put the answers." She wrote as she spoke. "Temporary housing now stable. Actively seeking work with references. Support from local community members. Child healthy and attending to medical needs." She underlined the last one twice. "They will want to pull you into defending yourself as a person," Ruth said. "We keep the focus on you as a parent." Mara watched her write. "You make it sound simple." "It is not simple," Ruth said, "but it is clear." That afternoon, Adrian came in from the yard carrying a wrapped bundle. He set it on the table and opened it to reveal a brass lantern dull from years without polish. "Found this in the storage loft," he said. "It is from the old lighthouse. Needs work, but the frame is solid." Mara touched the glass streaked with salt haze. "Why bring it here?" "Because you need something to look at that is not a stack of papers," Adrian said. "Something that reminds you not all lights are gone forever when they go out." She ran her hand over the brass. "Do you think you could light it again?" "I think we could," Adrian said. In the days that followed, their work settled into a pattern. Mornings with Ruth at the table rehearsing questions and answers. Afternoons with Adrian in the yard, sanding the lantern's frame, replacing the cracked glass. Evenings with Jo, who seemed to sense the change in the air, but did not ask. One night after Jo was asleep, Mara lingered by the lantern on the bench. The brass caught the stove light, not yet bright, but warmer than before. "You were not there the night it happened," Adrian said from the drafting table. It was not a question. "No," Mara said. "Jo had a fever. Evan called from the boat shouting because I was not at the event Veronica wanted me at. I stayed home. By the time I heard the sirens, it was over." Adrian's pencil stopped moving. "That is not negligence. That is parenting." "Tell that to Veronica," Mara said. "I will," Adrian said, "if they let me." Mara looked at him. "You would speak for me." "I would speak for Jo," he said, "and for the truth about that night. I was out there. I saw the broken gear. I saw the minutes lost. The lantern sat between them, its frame steadier than the air. The morning of the hearing broke cold and bright. Frost edged the grass by the lane. Ruth drove steady as if the road itself answered to her. Adrian sat in the back with Jo so Mara could have the front seat. No one spoke much. The county courthouse smelled of old wood and winter coats. Mara's hands were cold even inside her gloves. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Veronica stood with her lawyer hair flawless expression fixed. She looked Mara over as if assessing damage to a piece of furniture. When their case was called, Ruth sat behind Mara close enough that Mara could feel her presence without turning. Adrian was 2 rows back with Joe. The judge, a tall man with gray at his temples, read the file in silence for a long moment. Veronica's lawyer went first. He spoke of instability, lack of steady work, no extended family. He spoke of the night Evan died, of Mara's absence from the harbor. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. When it was Mara's turn, Ruth's hand squeezed her shoulder once, then let go. Mara answered the questions as they had practiced. Where do you live? Who helps care for your child? How is her health? She kept her voice steady, her answers short. Then Ruth called Adrian. He walked to the stand in his worn jacket, not dressed to impress, but clean. He spoke plainly. About the storm the night Evan died. About the broken rescue gear. About the delay that had nothing to do with who was or was not on the dock. About the funding requests that had been ignored. The lawyer tried to object. The judge let Adrian finish. I am not here to speak against the petitioner, Adrian said. I am here to say that on that night, the child was with her mother in a warm room because she was sick, and that was the right place for her to be. When the judge asked if there was anything else, Adrian looked at Mara once, then back at the bench. The truth matters, he said, even when it is quiet. The judge read his notes, the room holding still. Petition denied, he said finally. Full custody remains with the mother. There was no cheer, no applause, just the sound of the clerk writing and Joe's small voice whispering Mama into Mara's coat. That night they ate at the shop. Joe told a long story about a girl in her class who had a glitter sticker shaped like a star. Ruth listened with her tea in hand. Adrian passed bread without being asked. After dinner, Adrian set the restored lantern on the table. Its brass was clean, the glass clear. He lit it with a match. The flame caught and spread its glow through the small room. It is not the old lighthouse, he said, but it works. Mara watched the light shift across Joe's face, across Ruth's hands, across the walls that had once been just shelter. The tide would rise and fall again, but for the moment they were steady. Outside the bay was dark. Far off the real lighthouse still stood with its lens black. But here in the small shop that smelled of cedar and salt, a lamp burned because someone had chosen to keep it lit. Mara touched the lantern's frame. Thank you, she said. Adrian shook his head. Lights do not ask for thanks, he said. They just stay on.